ASEAN and Myanmar have held their second high-level meeting on the repatriation of Rohingyas from Bangladesh. The cooperation follows an ASEAN decision made at its November summit in Singapore.
Its disaster response team has suggested 3 ways the region could help. For more on this, Leong Wai Kit joins us live from Yangon. So, Wai Kit, how will ASEAN support the repatriation of the Rohingya refugees?
Well, Steve, I spoke to the AHA Center, which is ASEAN's disaster management arm. They told me one of the ways is that they'll be training about 100 local Myanmar experts to handle the situation in Rakhine State when repatriation does take place. So they'll be trained in areas such as assessing what the Rohingyas will need, assessing how to give them the kind of help, logistics arrangements, as well as information management. The other thing that they're helping Myanmar with is to help them process even more daily refugees. Right now, Myanmar can handle about 300 returning refugees a day. AHA Center feels that they can do more, so they're helping them in that sense. Having said that, though, it's really up to the Rohingyas themselves because they need to feel confident enough, feel safe enough before they will even step foot back into Myanmar.
All right, speaking of that confidence, are these new measures enough then to make them feel safe about going home?
Well, Glenda, purely from a quantitative point of view, numbers point of view, then yes, it is enough, especially if you've spoken to the Myanmar government and see things the Myanmar way. I said earlier that Myanmar is now working with ASEAN. Right now, Myanmar is also working with some UN bodies to try and solve the Rohingya crisis. And Myanmar has formed many panels, one of which is to look into serious wrongdoings in Rakhine State. And another development is that the World Bank has recently promised to develop Rakhine State by pumping in US $100 million. Of course, this deal was made possible because State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi had brokered the deal behind closed doors by meeting the World Bank leaders. So purely from that point of view, then yes, enough is done. But on the other side of the spectrum, qualitatively, some critics will say that nothing is done, not enough is done. Perhaps the most vocal critic would be the UN's fact-finding mission, because this team had investigated into the Rohingya crisis and they concluded that the Myanmar army was responsible for what they found evidence as genocide in Rakhine State. So very recently, they came out to tell the international community to cut off financial ties with the Myanmar army, because the fact-finding mission leader says that Myanmar is still not doing enough to control the conflict and to address human rights issues there. And recently, there have been 2 high-level UN leader visits to Myanmar, and although they met the Myanmar government and authorities and had very constructive engagements, based on what they saw, based on what they heard, they came away concluding that Rakhine State is still not conducive for the Rohingyas to return. So 2 very opposing schools of thought, but don't forget that these 2 schools of thought are connected with one common goal, and that is that they want the current humanitarian Rohingya crisis to be solved as soon as possible.
And indeed, that's why those high-level talks are in place. Thank you so much for breaking it down for us. Leong Wai Kit speaking to us from Myanmar.